most pressing issues on Africa World Hour with Tshepiso Mokwetla.
Channel Africa.
And we continue rounding up some of the top stories that we're looking at on Channel Africa World Hour this evening. We've been speaking about the start of the WHO Afro-Regional Summit. Health ministers from the region and other countries in the north meeting to discuss the challenges facing Africa and particularly the global south when it comes to reaching their targets for SDGs. And now we talk about the Eswatini Litigation Centre, ELC, alongside Mzwandile Banele Masuku, the Swaziland Rural Women's Assembly, and Melusi Simelane of the Southern Africa Litigation Centre. So they've filed an urgent application in the High Court of Eswatini to declare unconstitutional an agreement between the Kingdom of Eswatini and the United States of America that resulted in 5 foreign nationals with no familial or legal ties to Eswatini being incarcerated at the Matsapha Maximum Correctional Facility following their deportation from the United States. The case was due to be heard in the High Court of Eswatini last Friday, but was postponed until September 25 because the government reportedly did not file responding papers. The SALC's Melusi Simelane is a co-applicant, as we mentioned in the application, and joins us now to discuss this further. A very good evening, and thank you so much for speaking to us.
Good evening, Tshepiso, and thank you for having us this evening.
So when did you first find out about these 5 nationals who were to be incarcerated in Eswatini? We've heard about Swaziland being amongst other nations that have been having talks with the United States to take on third nation nationals on, even though they're not as we said, citizens or have filial relations to the country. So when did you first learn of it?
Surprising enough, Tshepiso, we all learned through social media. We are all aware of the U.S. administration currently. They are certainly running through social media. So that is when we found out on that very morning of the 16th of July from the Department of Homeland Security. So when this happened, a lot of questions were running through our heads because, obviously we had been following through what had been happening with the U.S. deal with El Salvador as an example, with the deal with Panama. Mind you, we had also been following with the UK Rwanda deal, and this is stuff that was happening on the news. One wouldn't have thought it would come close to our shore. So this was quite surprising to us as citizens, surprising to us as civil society, and more so because we were hearing that even people in power, that it would be your parliamentarians, and some people, rumors were circling that some people in cabinet were also shocked to hear about this.
That's very interesting because I was going to ask that you say, you were quite surprised to hear of it, but based on statements made particularly by human rights activists and organizations in Eswatini, your government is not necessarily transparent in its decision making. So I was going to ask, why would that come as a surprise? But it's interesting to hear that you say even lawmakers, parliamentarians were unaware. Has it been openly said by them, or this is rumors that you're hearing?
So what then prompted our application, Tshepiso, was the mere fact that it was clear for everyone to see that parliamentarians did not have an idea about this. Because I think perhaps around 3 weeks ago, that is when the executive was due for parliament for their first quarter reporting in terms of how are they doing as cabinet, Section 69, they have to account to parliament. It was then that parliamentarians constantly raised this issue when the head of government was reporting back, the prime minister. So it was clear to everyone, and that is when then as civil society, we thought, wait a minute. So clearly here, there is Section 38 that has been breached. That means parliamentarians were not involved in this international agreement, because you remember, any sort of foreign policy position that the government takes must be put through the entire sort of system of democratic values. So parliament was not consulted purely because they were asking questions. Because if they were consulted, they wouldn't have been asking the questions that they were asking. Silly questions like how much are we getting out of this? Who are these people? When are they living? So it was clear for everyone to see that no, Parliament was not involved. And just perhaps, if I may, Tshepiso, to your point about our government being known not to be a transparent one. I think it's important that we clarify that in as much as it might appear to be that our government is not transparent, but it's up to us. It's incumbent on us as the citizenry. It's incumbent on us as civil society to make sure that we put our democratic institutions to test. It's the African Union that has said this year's theme is about the dignity of the African person and the diaspora at large. And therefore, how do we do that without us standing up to sort of push for accountability, to sort of push for open government?
And which is what you're obviously doing now by putting the case to and through the courts. What have you learned thus far, though, as in who may be behind the decision and not just the final signing off of the agreement, but who would have facilitated the actual deportation of these individuals to Eswatini?
So it then goes back to the case that we've filed, because we've cited the Prime Minister, of course, as the head of government, and we've cited his foreign secretary, sorry, not secretary, his foreign minister, and then, of course, the Minister of Home Affairs, who would have allowed them entry, the immigration laws. We've also cited the Commissioner General of our correctional services, because this is where these people are being held. And obviously, we are not aware in terms of how this deal was struck, which is precisely why we are in court, right? But we are also not aware of the details of this deal. And there's been a lot of rumor mongering amongst communities. Some people saying, well, look at the trade tariffs, for instance. Swaziland has not been hit hard, so perhaps that is a benefit for us. But for us, that's neither here nor there, because it's hard for us to say we are benefiting from this agreement if we do not even know the details of this agreement. We do not know who signed this agreement, because it was only days later when the Prime Minister started calling out a press conference with the Foreign Affairs Minister next to him that it was clear that, oh, perhaps this is sort of a cabinet collective in terms of the decision that has been taken. But at least for us, the Constitution has been breached, and we are not going to sit idly and allow for our democratic values to continue down the drain, particularly, Tsapiso, if I might, because our Constitution in Eswatini turns 20 years this year. And you were right to say there's been a lot of talk about our country not being a transparent and open one. And we cannot then say 20 years after our constitution, we are going to allow a head of government who's going to slap on the face of separation of powers. So we must continue to ask the courts that they hear this matter. Of course, it's been pushed to the 25th, but we are going to continue our advocacy. We are going to continue with lobbying for anyone with power to sort of be interested and speak to this issue, because it's about democracy, it's about sovereignty, and it's about the rule of law.
And what are you asking the courts to do? To reverse the bilateral agreement with the United States, and also send back those who've been incarcerated in Eswatini?
Well, so what we're asking the court, number one, is to declare that this agreement is an international agreement as envisaged in Section 238 of our Constitution, that it required ratification by Parliament, right? So we want that to be the declaratory order from the court. And the second step would be to say, then, if that be the case, then it's an unconstitutional agreement, right? And then the third thing that we're asking the court to do, at least at an interim basis, is to restrain the government from further receiving more people to come from the United States. Because maybe, let me clarify this issue, because there's been a lot of people who's been saying, well, what do you have to gain and what do you have to lose? These people are being held in prison facilities, but our prison facilities, Tsapiso, are being funded by the taxpayer. But over and above that, we have had a report from the Human Rights Commission in Eswatini, which happened at least 2 months before the plane landed, where the Human Rights Commission had said our prisons are under-resourced, but they're also overcrowded. The one particular prison, for instance, the Matsapha Maximum, which is where they're being held, the report from the Human Rights Commission said they are overcrowded by at around 170%. So then the question begs, where are you keeping these people? What about the issue of the Mandela rules? For instance, and the Mandela rules are the UN minimum standards on the treatment of prisoners. So there's a lot of conversation that needs to happen here, be it the human rights treatment of these people, because they cannot be tortured, they cannot be treated inhumanely. Not just these individuals, but also our own citizens who are incarcerated in these facilities. We are constantly, on the other hand, trying to push for the government to make sure that they're resourcing our facilities, to make sure that these people who are incarcerated are being rehabilitated. So there's a lot that we're asking the court to do, and we understand it's sort of a shock for everyone, considering, as I said earlier, that it's known to be a government that shies away from transparency. But we hope that at least the courts are going to say, look, if the executive is failing to account to Parliament as per Section 69, at least the courts must step in to compel them to sort of comply.
Well, Melusi, I hope you do come back to us and let us know if the government does actually come to the party and file responding papers and what the outcome is. So we will be in touch and speak to you. That is the Melusi Simelane of the Southern Africa Litigation Centre. His organisation and others have joined hands of filing urgent court papers at the High Court of Eswatini, asking the government to declare not only the processes but who's behind an agreement with the United States to deport 5 foreign nationals to the country. Brings the time to 8 minutes to 10. Well, let's wrap up with some news on the G20.